into a small apartment outside Atlanta, hoping a new beginning would finally bring peace. Instead, every morning felt exactly like the one before. She worked exhausting shifts at a local diner, returned home to an empty apartment, and spent countless nights staring at unpaid bills spread across her kitchen table. The loneliness was worse than she had expected. It wasn't just the absence of a husband, it was the absence of purpose, companionship, and stability. The apartment that was supposed to symbolize freedom often felt more like a reminder of everything she had lost. One of the few people she regularly encountered was Malik, the owner of the apartment building. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that naturally demanded attention. Unlike most landlords, he seemed to know everything happening inside his property. Kimberly always kept her conversations with him brief and professional, but there was something unsettling about the way he observed people. Sometimes she felt as though he could read every struggle she was trying so hard to hide. The real trouble began when rent came due during one of the most difficult months she had ever experienced. Unexpected expenses had drained her savings, and her bank account was sinking deeper into the negative with every passing day. Kimberly spent hours rehearsing explanations, hoping she could somehow convince Malik to give her more time. Yet when the inevitable knock finally echoed through her apartment, fear immediately settled in her stomach. Standing outside was Malik, calm and unreadable as always. Kimberly quickly began explaining her situation, promising that she would catch up soon if he could just be patient a little longer. To her surprise, he didn't interrupt or argue. Instead, he quietly stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The simple action changed the entire atmosphere. Suddenly, the conversation felt like it was about much more than unpaid rent. Over the following days, an unusual arrangement began taking shape between them. Malik made it clear that he was willing to help her stay in the apartment, but there were expectations attached to his generosity. Kimberly knew she should walk away. Every logical thought warned her that she was stepping into dangerous territory. Yet loneliness, financial pressure, and emotional exhaustion clouded her judgment. After feeling invisible for so long, the attention itself became difficult to resist. Soon, her life started revolving around a routine she never expected. Work, rent, and Malik became the center of her world. What she initially convinced herself was temporary slowly became something much harder to escape. The more time passed, the more dependent she felt. She hated admitting it, but she had begun relying on him in ways that went far beyond financial help. Then everything changed when an anonymous note appeared on her door. The message was short but devastating. It suggested she was not the only woman involved in Malik's life. Hurt and angry, Kimberly confronted him immediately. The conversation shattered every illusion she had been holding on to. Malik admitted that he had never promised exclusivity. In his mind, their arrangement was exactly what it had always been, nothing more and nothing less. Walking back to her apartment that night, Kimberly felt foolish. What had started as desperation had quietly transformed into something much more complicated. Somewhere along the way, she had allowed herself to develop feelings she never intended to have. The realization left her feeling betrayed, not only by Malik, but by herself. Determined to regain control of her life, Kimberly began creating distance between herself and Malik. She stopped responding to his messages and focused more of her attention on work. During that period, she grew unexpectedly close to a coworker named Evan. Unlike Malik, Evan was gentle, respectful, and sincere. He listened when she spoke, remembered small details about her life, and treated her with a kindness she hadn't experienced in years. Being around him reminded Kimberly of who she used to be before loneliness and desperation had changed her. For the first time in months, she started imagining a future that didn't revolve around survival. She could picture stability, friendship, and maybe even happiness again. But those hopes didn't last long. Malik soon became aware of her growing connection with Evan, and his reaction revealed just how much influence he believed he still had over her life. Their confrontation forced Kimberly to face an uncomfortable truth. Malik wasn't simply someone she had become involved with. He represented an entire system of dependence that had trapped her emotionally and financially. Through reminders about her lease, her debt, and the difficulties she might face if she challenged him, he made it clear that walking away would not be easy. Out of fear, Kimberly eventually ended things with Evan despite genuinely caring about him. It was one of the most painful decisions she had ever made. Yet the situation also opened her eyes. She realized that every choice she was making was driven by fear rather than freedom. Something inside her finally shifted. One evening, after another encounter that left her feeling emotionally drained instead of fulfilled, she looked Malik directly in the eyes and told him that the version of herself who once accepted the arrangement no longer existed. The statement seemed to affect him more than she expected. For the first time since they met, he left without arguing. The following days became a turning point. Kimberly started saving every dollar she could. She searched endlessly for alternative housing and eventually found a woman willing to rent out a spare room in another town. The room wasn't luxurious, but it represented something far more valuable: independence. She planned carefully and waited for the right opportunity. Then one evening, while Malik was away, she packed her belongings and left. There were no dramatic confrontations, no emotional goodbyes, and no guarantees that life would immediately improve. She simply drove away, carrying everything she could fit into her car and refusing to look back. The journey wasn't easy. Even after leaving, memories continued to follow her. Some brought regret. Others brought confusion. Healing took time. There were nights when she questioned her decisions and mornings when she doubted her strength. But with every passing week, she slowly rebuilt pieces of herself that had been lost. For the first time in a long while, her future belonged entirely to her. The uncertainty ahead no longer felt terrifying because it was her uncertainty to face. She had escaped a situation that blurred the lines between dependence and control, and although the scars remained, they served as reminders of how far she had come. Kimberly eventually understood something important. Freedom rarely arrives all at once. Sometimes it begins with a single difficult decision, followed by another, and another after that. Walking away did not erase her mistakes or undo the pain she had experienced. But it gave her something she had almost forgotten existed: a chance to build a life defined by her own